El Chapo was basically put out there to have the spotlight so that he could cover for Mayo Zambada.
We're learning a major arrest was just made. This is quite the big kahuna here.
I'm not sure exactly what actually happened.
You know, we've heard a lot of rumors swirling right now. Seem to be scrambling for information about what happened, just like everyone else.
I'm sure you've all heard the news by now. The arrest of Ismael El Mayo Zambada isn't just another cartel takedown. It's the end of an era. The man behind the legend was so elusive and so powerful that for over 5 decades, he pulled the strings of one of the world's most notorious drug empires without ever seeing the inside of a jail cell. That is, until now. But here's where it gets wild. El Mayo's capture wasn't just a lucky break. It was an inside job that could make Hollywood scriptwriters jealous. Think about it. The son of El Mayo's former partner, the infamous El Chapo, turning on him? It's like a real-life crime thriller, and it's all going down right now, as we speak. As we dig deeper into this story, you'll discover a web of betrayal, power struggles, and high-stakes gambling that goes far beyond anything you've heard on the news. We're about to take you on a journey into the dark heart of the drug world, where the line between allies and enemies is thinner than you could ever imagine. Ismael Zambada Garcia, better known as El Mayo, was never your typical drug lord. And now, at the ripe old age of 76, he's more like the godfather of godfathers, a true living legend in the narco world.
Mayo Zambada is worth close to $10 billion. And I'll remind you, that's a lot of money.
But he wasn't always a menacing figure. Born on January 1st, 1948, in a small village in Sinaloa, Mexico, El Mayo came from humble beginnings. But don't let that fool you. This guy climbed the ranks of the criminal underworld faster than his predecessors, and by the early 1970s, he was already making waves in the drug trade.
These guys were billionaires.
Yes.
Barely into their 30s.
That's correct.
Damn.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. While other cartel bosses were out there flashing their wealth and making headlines, El Mayo kept it low-key. Sure, everyone knew his name, but few had ever even seen his face. In fact, what you're looking at right now is one of the few confirmed pictures of El Mayo in existence prior to the events that unfolded on Tuesday.
We haven't really had a photo of this guy probably for 25 years.
Can you imagine being one of the most powerful criminals on the planet and still being able to grab a coffee at your local cafe without anyone batting an eye? That was El Mayo's superpower. But what made El Mayo truly unique was his longevity. In a world where cartel leaders often have the life expectancy of a mayfly, El Mayo managed to stay at the top for over 5 decades. It's a mix of brains, strategy, and a whole lot of caution.
The Sinaloa cartel is basically run by a person that nobody hears about, who's very discreet, and that's El Mayo Zambada.
Unlike his flashier counterparts, El Mayo preferred to operate from the shadows. He didn't have a fleet of gold-plated guns or a private zoo. Instead, he invested in what really mattered in the drug trade: connections. From corrupt politicians to rival gang members, El Mayo had a knack for making the right friends in all the wrong places. But don't mistake his low profile for weakness. El Mayo was known for his ruthlessness when it came to business.
Mayo Zambada had been running the cartel for a number of years, and they have a very strong bench. Very good leaders.
That's pretty high praise in a field that's not exactly known for its ethics awards. Now, let's talk about El Mayo's role in the Sinaloa cartel. Along with the now imprisoned Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, El Mayo co-founded what would become one of the most powerful criminal organizations in history.
The cartel has been in existence since 1989 and is currently the most powerful drug cartel in the world. They operate in 6 of the 7 continents in the world.
And while El Chapo always was the face of the operation, getting caught, escaping, and generally living life like a narco rock star, El Mayo was the quiet power behind the throne. He was the strategist, the diplomat, the one who kept the machine running smoothly, while El Chapo was off tunneling his way out of maximum security prisons and attracting unwanted attention through his brutal way of doing business.
El Chapo was basically put out there to have the spotlight so that he could cover for Mayo Zambada. He is a sociopath that has no feelings, that can be basically hitting you with his right arm and eating a sandwich with his left hand.
And while that sounds overwhelming, El Chapo's merciless ways, combined with El Mayo's wits, was just what the Sinaloa cartel needed to secure their spot as the most lucrative drug cartel on the planet. Under their leadership, the Sinaloa cartel grew into a global empire. We're talking about an organization that at its peak was believed to be responsible for smuggling 25% of all illegal drugs entering the US from Mexico. That's not just big business, that's Amazon-level market domination. But El Mayo's influence went beyond just drugs. He was known as the engineer for his ability to build complex networks of corruption.
I'm talking about corrupt politicians, I'm talking about the money laundering cells, the enforcement cells, the logistical cells.
As we dive deeper into the story of El Mayo's arrest, keep this in mind. We're not just talking about the fall of a drug lord. We're witnessing the end of an era, the toppling of a criminal empire that has shaped the underworld for half a century. And trust me, the way it all went down is even more incredible than you might think. It's a sunny day in July 2024, and El Mayo, the man who's managed to evade capture for longer than some of you have been alive, is just going about his business. But little does he know, he's about to become the unwitting star of one of the most audacious sting operations in history.
We've heard a lot of rumors swirling right now that there was a setup, that he did surrender, and that this denial is a ruse.
Enter our unlikely hero, or should we say, anti-hero, Joaquin Guzman Lopez. Ring any bells? It should. He's the son of none other than El Chapo, El Mayo's former partner in crime. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, isn't he supposed to be on El Mayo's side? Well, in the world of cartels, today's ally can be tomorrow's worst enemy.
How did the son of an imprisoned drug lord end up on a private plane in El Paso, Texas?
It turns out that Guzman Lopez had been playing one dangerous double game. For months, he'd been in secret talks with US law enforcement, particularly a small team from the FBI and Homeland Security. Their goal? To bring down the last standing titan of the Sinaloa cartel. Now, let's pause for a second and appreciate the irony here. The son of El Chapo, the man who made headlines with his dramatic prison escapes, was now helping to capture his father's former partner. What's more, Guzman Lopez's own lawyer seems to be just as confused as the rest of us.
I'm not sure exactly what actually happened.
So, how did they pull it off? With a plan so audacious, it borders on the unbelievable. Allegedly, Guzman Lopez approached El Mayo with a proposition, a chance to inspect some new, clandestine airstrips in southern Mexico. For a man always looking to expand his empire, it must have seemed like a golden opportunity. El Mayo, the cautious old fox that he was, probably thought he had all his bases covered. After all, he was dealing with the son of his old partner. What could go wrong? As it turns out, everything. The private plane that was supposed to take El Mayo to these mythical airstrips had a slightly different flight plan. Instead of heading south into the heart of Mexico, it turned north. Destination, a small airport near El Paso, Texas.
This private airplane left the city of Hermosillo, Mexico around 8 o'clock this morning and landed, yesterday morning, Thursday, and landed in El Paso a couple hours later. Both of these suspects were processed. We've seen photos of them.
Remember when I mentioned that we haven't seen a photo of this man for the better part of 2 decades? Well, now here it is, on full display for the world to see. And can you imagine the look on El Mayo's face when he realized what was happening? The man who had outsmarted authorities for decades, who had built an empire on his ability to stay one step ahead, had walked right into a trap. So, as the private plane touched down, it wasn't Mexican soil beneath its wheels, but American tarmac. And waiting on the ground wasn't a welcoming committee of cartel members, but a team of US federal agents ready to make the arrest of a lifetime. In a matter of moments, it was all over. The great El Mayo, the last of the old guard, was in handcuffs. Just like that, more than 50 years of evading justice came to an end. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Remember Guzman Lopez? Well, he wasn't just there to lure El Mayo. In a twist, he too was arrested alongside El Mayo. The man who had orchestrated this whole operation ended up in cuffs himself. Talk about a plot twist. It gets even trickier as Guzman Lopez's lawyer's initial confusion seemingly starts wearing off mid-press conference, and his version of events only adds to the mystery of what exactly transpired that day.
There has never been an agreement with the government with Joaquin Guzman Lopez. There is no agreement. Period.
You heard that right. Apparently, we're dealing with a mystery within a mystery, and all we can do right now is scratch our heads and wonder. But whichever narrative you choose to buy, there does seem to be a general consensus that this was an ambush.
It seems that there was some plan in advance hatched by Guzman. If the goal of Guzman and his henchmen was to eliminate El Mayo, then you think they could simply have killed him. The fact that they went through the effort of bringing him here to be prosecuted would suggest that Guzman has arranged for or is hoping for some sort of lenient treatment by the U.S. authorities.
So there you have it. The fall of El Mayo, brought about by an act of betrayal so bold, so unexpected, that it's sure to go down in the annals of criminal history. But as we'll see, this is just the beginning of the story. The ripple effects of this arrest are set to shake the foundations of the criminal underworld for years to come. And here's the kicker. El Mayo's lawyer is now even claiming that his client was forcibly kidnapped by Guzman Lopez.
I did speak to El Mayo's lawyer this morning, and he was adamant that his client did not surrender, did not come voluntarily.
According to the attorney, Frank Perez, El Mayo was ambushed, thrown to the ground, and handcuffed by 6 men in military uniforms. They allegedly tied his legs, put a black bag over his head, and threw him into the back of a pickup truck before forcing him onto the plane. Whether you believe this version of events or not, one thing's for sure. The capture of El Mayo Zambada marks the end of an era in the drug trade. As we delve deeper into this story, we'll explore the potential fallout from El Mayo's arrest, the power vacuum it might create, and what it means for the future of the drug trade. Let's start with the immediate aftermath. So we've got El Mayo, and he's now sitting in a U.S. courtroom, looking more like a frail grandfather than a cartel kingpin.
One of the world's most powerful drug cartel leaders appeared in a Texas federal court on Friday. Ismael El Mayo Zambada, leader of Mexico's Sinaloa cartel, pleaded not guilty on all charges after being arrested by U.S. federal agents in Texas on Thursday.
But here's the kicker. He did it from a wheelchair. Talk about a fall from grace. Now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. El Mayo's arrest isn't just about one man. It's about the power vacuum he's left behind. This is a guy who's been at the top of the food chain for over 5 decades. So, what happens when you remove an apex predator from its ecosystem?
The concern is, however, that when you take out a top kingpin like this, that it creates a power vacuum and that there's fighting to sort of fill that and fill their shoes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Remember the Chapitos, El Chapo's sons? Apparently, they've been itching to take full control of the Sinaloa cartel for years. With El Mayo out of the picture, they might finally have their chance.
What I'm hearing so far from the state of Sinaloa is a lot of concern and fear that this is going to result in violence there.
But here's the thing. Not everyone in the cartel is thrilled about the idea of these young upstarts taking over. You see, El Mayo was old school. He believed in keeping a low profile and minimizing violence to avoid heat from the authorities. The Chapitos? Not so much. They're known for their flashy lifestyle and their willingness to use extreme violence to get what they want.
They fed their enemies alive to tigers, electrocuted them, waterboarded them, and shot them at close range with a .50 caliber machine gun.
Tonight, Mexican neighborhoods littered with bullet casings as dozens are dead in the wake of Ovidio's arrest.
It's like comparing a chess grandmaster to a group of guys who think the solution to every problem is flipping the board. And it's not just internal strife we need to worry about.
You also have a very, very powerful and very violent drug organization by the name of Jalisco New Generation Cartel.
The CJNG are probably licking their chops right now. They've been waiting for a chance to muscle in on Sinaloa territory, and El Mayo's arrest might be just the opening they need.
There's many others producing fentanyl and also amphetamines, synthetic drugs. And the cartels are starting to move into synthetic drugs. It's much cheaper to manufacture them. They make much more money.
But here's a twist that'll make your head spin. El Mayo's arrest might in fact not change much at all. Why? Because the Sinaloa cartel isn't just one man or even a group of men. It's a system, a well-oiled machine that's been running for decades.
I don't think that they will have any significant impact on the inner workings of the Sinaloa cartel. And as an example, I will give to you exactly what happened when the leader of the Sinaloa cartel, Chapo Guzman was extradited to the United States had no impact.
So, what we're looking at here is a potential powder keg. Will the Sinaloa cartel implode in a blaze of internal conflict? Will rival cartels swoop in to claim territory? Or will it be business as usual, with new leaders stepping up to fill El Mayo's shoes? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure, the Mexican drug trade is in for some turbulent times. Now, let's zoom out even further and look at the big picture. Because make no mistake, folks, the arrest of Mayo Zambada isn't just about drugs and cartels. It's about geopolitics, public health crises, and the future of the war on drugs itself. First up, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Fentanyl. This synthetic opioid has been ravaging communities across the United States, and guess who's been one of the biggest suppliers? That's right, the Sinaloa cartel under El Mayo's leadership. Fentanyl overdoses are now the leading cause of death for Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. We're talking about a drug so potent, so deadly, that it's killing more young Americans than car accidents or gun violence.
Hospitals are forced to provide billions of dollars of uncompensated care. Fatal drugs like fentanyl are now flooding our streets.
But here's where it gets complicated. The Sinaloa cartel didn't just stumble into the fentanyl trade. They saw an opportunity and seized it. As we know, fentanyl is cheaper to produce than heroin, more potent, and doesn't require vast poppy fields that can be spotted by satellites. It's the perfect drug for cartels looking to maximize profits and minimize risk. So, while El Mayo's arrest might disrupt the supply chain in the short term, don't expect the fentanyl crisis to disappear overnight. As long as there's demand, someone will step up to supply it.
Que se expandió como una pandemia. O sea, empezó a haber gente muerta por aquí, por allá.
I've heard of people, but it's the first time they ever do it.
Now, let's talk politics. The timing of this arrest is interesting. It's election year in the US, and what better way to score points with voters than by taking down one of the world's most wanted drug lords? But it's not just US politics we need to consider. This arrest has sent shockwaves through the Mexican political establishment too. President Sheinbaum is demanding full transparency from the US about the operation. Having one of your country's most notorious criminals snatched from under your nose isn't a great look for any government.
It appears that Mexican authorities had no role in any of this operation. They have said so publicly and seem to be scrambling for information about what happened just like everyone else.
This brings us to a crucial question. What does El Mayo's arrest mean for US-Mexico relations? On the surface, it looks like a win for bilateral cooperation in the war on drugs.
The fact that the U.S. is, bringing these people to justice is pretty remarkable.
But dig a little deeper, and things get murky. The fact that Mexican authorities were kept in the dark about the operation speaks volumes. It suggests a lack of trust between the two countries' law enforcement agencies. And let's be real, given the history of corruption in Mexico's drug war, can you really blame the US for playing their cards close to the chest? But you can't really fight a transnational problem like drug trafficking without transnational cooperation. The arrest of El Mayo might be a short-term win, but if it damages US-Mexico relations in the long run, it could end up being a bittersweet victory. So, where do we go from here? Some experts are calling for a complete rethink of drug policy. They argue that the kingpin strategy, taking out cartel leaders one by one, simply doesn't work. It creates power vacuums, sparks violent succession struggles, and does little to address the root causes of drug addiction and trafficking. Others say we need to double down, that El Mayo's arrest proves the strategy can work if we just push harder. It's a debate that's been raging for decades, and El Mayo's arrest has just added fuel to the fire. One thing's for sure, the war on drugs is far from over. El Mayo's arrest is a significant chapter, but it's not the end of the story. As we move forward, we'll need to grapple with tough questions about addiction, poverty, corruption, and international cooperation if we want to make real progress. It's crucial that we don't lose sight of the human cost behind all these headlines and power plays, because at the end of the day, the drug trade isn't just about kingpins and cartels. It's about real people whose lives are irreversibly affected by this vicious cycle of supply and demand. For every high-profile arrest like El Mayo's, there are countless unnamed victims, ordinary people caught in the crossfire of cartel wars or silenced for daring to speak out. Journalists, politicians, police officers, and civilians. The cartel cartels don't discriminate when it comes to eliminating threats or making examples. Then there are the addicts, the end users of the products El Mayo and his ilk peddle, people trapped in the grip of severe addiction, often stemming from prescription opioid abuse. Are we doing enough to address the root causes of drug addiction? Are we providing enough support for communities ravaged by cartel violence? Are we offering viable economic alternatives to those who might otherwise be drawn into the drug trade? These are tough questions without easy answers, but they're questions we need to grapple with if we want to make real, lasting progress in the war on drugs. The arrest of El Mayo Zambada is undoubtedly a significant moment in the history of the drug war. It's a testament to the dedication of law enforcement agencies and a blow to one of the world's most powerful criminal organizations. But it's also a reminder of how much work still lies ahead. The war isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. So, what do you think of El Mayo's arrest? Make sure to voice your opinion down in the comment section below. And also, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, stay safe.